From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme 3 podcast. Hello and welcome, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, friends, and family to the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles, the show in which we pick 3 films based on one theme. I'm Nicholas Ibarra. I'm joined as always by my brilliant co-host, Bella F. Stratus. Bella, what is going on today? It's starting to get hot over here in the city of Los Angeles.
Seriously, I know. It's crazy. It's summertime now. But I'm doing really well. You would be proud of me. Yesterday, I attended my first double bill at the New Beverly Theater.
You stayed for both?
I stayed for both.
Hell yeah.
It was fucking amazing. I'm so glad I did. It was so much fun. I saw Imagine Me and You, which was a 2005 British rom-com, which I'm always down for.
Nice.
And that was great. And then I saw Alice Wu's Saving Face, which was so good. And we may or may not be talking about it this week.
Yes.
So we will.
Well, that's great news, Bella. I'm glad I know you texted me and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do both. And I say, try staying for both if you can, because once you stay for one double bill at the Bev, whenever you start to see kind of just like how they program the double bills and like how they feed into each other. And it's also just like fun. Like there's not a lot of theaters that offer double bills anymore. So once you do it once, you're more inclined to do it again, especially once you look at their calendar month to month. There's always like, at least 10 double bills on there that are just like, fucking A, what a double bill.
I've got my eye on the Sean Baker Tangerine in Florida Project double bill at the end of this month for sure.
I will message you after the show because Sonia and I are going to that, but I don't know which date, so I'll let you know. Actually, I will let you know right now. It's the 28th, June 28th. So if you get your tickets to June 28th double bill of it's the Sean Baker double bill. Maybe you'll see Bella, you'll see me, you'll see Sonia. You can stop over, you could say hi.
Yes, please.
We would love to hear from you.
That'd be awesome.
So, the other thing about the heat is, do you feel something else going around right now, Bella?
I think I do.
It's love. Love is in the air. Love is in the air. It's true. We are talking romance today. We're talking love stories, not just love stories. We're talking love stories of the queer variety.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got some absolute bangers for y'all. Again, this is going to be a two-parter. We've got part 1 today, and then keep an eye out. Part 2 is going to be coming your way later on this week. So, Bella, we are going to have you start us off here with not only an incredible film, but one of your favorites, I believe, and the inspiration for your very popular Instagram handle.
So true. Yes, I'm starting off bold here with my second favorite film of all time. It was the easiest film to choose for our queer love stories theme this week because out of every romance or love story that at least I've seen in the movies so far in my life, I think this film is what I consider to be the greatest romance film of all time. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Bold statement of the day.
Really bold statement. Yeah, we're starting off strong. Introducing Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Directed and written by Celine Sciamma, this 2019 French romance and picturesque period piece stars 2 utterly brilliant French actresses, Noémie Merlant and Adèle Haenel, as Marianne and Eloise. The film takes place in the late 18th century in France. Marianne, a young professional painter, has been commissioned to paint the portrait of a young aristocratic bride-to-be, Eloise. But upon her arrival at the remote manor in the countryside of France, Marianne finds herself faced with a seemingly impossible task when she discovers she must find a way to paint Eloise without her knowing. It's revealed that Eloise rejects her arranged marriage to a gentleman in Milan, and to prevent it from happening, she's refused to pose for any painters that have visited the manor. But this time, Eloise has been told that Marianne is a hired companion who will accompany her on her daily walks. And in these moments, Marianne must analyze Eloise's features without detection in order to put together an accurate portrait to be sent to her future husband, which is ultimately the next step in solidifying their marriage. But as time goes on, Marianne and Eloise learn more about each other. They become really good friends, and Marianne feels that she must tell Eloise the truth. Much to Eloise's mother's shock, even after hearing the truth, Eloise agrees to pose for Marianne if it means that she can stay longer. So over the next few days together, Marianne's studious looks turn to those of longing and desire, matched by Eloise's own desire for Marianne. And what unfolds is the most beautiful and artistic romance to ever grace the silver screen, in my opinion. Nick, what were your thoughts on this film?
So I quickly want to talk about the first time I saw this film,
Yes,
because
please.
I hadn't thought about it until Sonia mentioned it to me the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on Valentine's Day of 2020 that my beautiful wife, Sonia, and I went on a date, as we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it couldn't have been more us. So us this date night. We went and we had some sushi, and then we walked down Sunset Boulevard, and we went to the now vacant Cinerama Dome, which is still weird to think and say that Cinerama Dome is currently no more.
Wow, yeah.
Hopefully not for long, but we saw Portrait of a Lady on Fire in the dome, in the Cinerama Dome, and it was breathtakingly beautiful to see it on a screen that big. But it was also the last movie that we saw at the Cinerama Dome ever, and potentially one of the last movies that ever played at the Cinerama Dome, because 1 month later it closed for COVID, and
oh my god,
and it never reopened. I'm not sure. I think they probably had a movie or two after Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but it was the last movie that we saw there. But seeing the imagery and that breathtaking, beautiful imagery on that massive screen
I'm jealous.
Was awesome.
Yeah.
In a very literal sense, it was like very awesome. We heard a lot of awes in the audience. You know,
I love it. Yes. How could you not?
But yeah. But you know, like the lighting and the visuals aside, the physical performances by the two leads is what stood out. It's like what I remember most about that film.
Yes.
Their performances are so outstanding, and that game of cat and mouse and courtship and romance, is so much of it is done non-verbally or through subtext.
Yes.
And a lot of the film's most powerful and memorable moments involve these characters just like staring at each other or sneaking peeks at each other.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
So it's really, really, really loved it when I saw it. It was, I think, one of my favorites, or my favorite of that year. And was happy to revisit it.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I couldn't agree more. I think, we talked about Gina Rowland's performance in A Woman Under the Influence in our Mother's Day episode as being regarded as like one of the greatest performances ever. And I would honestly put Adele and Noemi's performance in this up there with that, because it's just that art of subtle expression. Like you said, so much is said between them through Marianne's slight eyebrow raises or like Adele's ever so subtle side smile. It's the physicality of their performances, and it's just incredible to watch. And yeah, when I first watched this film, I was like, wow, so that's what it feels like to watch an undeniable 10 out of 10 film. Like, I was like, I understand and I agree that film is subjective, but not when it comes to this film. Like this, if you don't think this is a perfect film, I'm sorry, you're wrong. So that's just how I feel. But in all seriousness, yeah, there's so much about this film that I'm excited to talk about. I think one of the first things I want to point out is just the cinematography. Like you were saying, I have not had the privilege of watching this on a big screen yet, but I can only imagine how it looks. I was reading about the cinematographer Claire Mathen. She had the option between shooting this on 35 millimeter film or digital. And she went with digital, which, as much as I love 35 millimeter, like, thank God she did, because I think it looks absolutely incredible. And I think digital kind of allowed her to play more with lighting and colors in a way that makes every single shot look like a painting of this era. I actually read that her and the director went to visit some museums before shooting to study like the art of female painters of this time, specifically portraits. So they would know how they wanted to manipulate lighting, cinematography, costume, and makeup to really make this film look like an 18th century oil painting. And
Right.
and that just made so much sense to me, because like watching this, I was like, God damn, I wish my skin looked like that. Like Marianne and Eloise, their skin looks so soft and like beautiful in every shot. There's no harsh shadows. The colors are vibrant. And they were able to capture all this light and color in camera, because I read that they use this satin filter or like lens on the camera. And it's just like, it's this kind of inventive and artistically brilliant research and filmmaking that I think gives this film just the most beautiful, crisp focus, but also like dreamy, vibrant colors that just melt into each other. So I was really wowed by that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always am an advocate, as you know, and as all of our listeners know, I'm always an advocate for shooting on film,
Yeah.
especially period pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but, and most of the time when I watch period pieces and they're not shot on film,
Hmm.
it almost immediately pulls me out. Like it almost always immediately has this, like, there's a level of the suspension of disbelief is just like evaporated just a
Yeah.
pinch, even if it's subconscious.
Right.
But I hadn't realized or thought about it until you talked about it right now, but that did not happen with this film, and
Mm.
perhaps it is because of the things that you just mentioned, that it does kind of look like this 18th century painting where
Yeah.
there aren't really any blacks.
Yeah.
The colors are vibrant, but still like pastelly enough and blended in enough to make it feel both beautiful, but like not tired and worn.
Yeah. Totally.
So I hadn't even thought of that or placed it. I didn't even know that they shot it on digital. I didn't know much about the making of this film, but that is fascinating to hear. And
Yeah. I thought it was so cool.
yeah,
And then, of course, like on top of, sorry, not to go too crazy with the cinematography, but it's such a big aspect of this film that we can't not
it is.
talk
Yeah,
about it. Um,
right.
but I also, another aspect of like the romance in the cinematography that I love is this like observant kind of cinematography.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of see the through the lens of Marianne's eyes, like the way that she sees um, Eloise and the way she's studying her to like accurately draw or paint her. And I was reading an IndieWire interview with Claire Mathen, and she just had a quote that I thought was like perfectly described this observant or like studious turned desired female gaze that I think really perfectly defines the cinematography. She said, I had to try to be a camera that looks, that peers, and to always find the correct centering of the faces within the frame. Celine, the director, wanted to make this proximity palpable, and we had to look at these faces and not frame them, but be with them. And I
Mm.
just thought they 100% mastered this effect. Like from the very beginning, it's clear that this story is going to be told through Marianne's experience with just like the opening scene, or even through her own eyes. And like when she meets Eloise, the camera is her own gaze as she's studying her hands or like her ears, her jawline. And throughout the film, as a viewer, we can also sense the moment that this gaze shifts from that of like the painter to the lover, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like there's so much
Right.
desire and love and lust behind the camera's eyes once their relationship and their love blossoms. And it just adds to like the romance of this film so much. My heart can hardly handle it. I love it so much. But yeah, so I wanted to shout out that aspect of it, because there's a lot of like visual metaphors of love in this film. The most obvious, I think, is painting. But another one that I had never noticed until this rewatch was just a very subtle thing that I thought was fun, is when when Marianne lights Eloise's like old portrait on fire, the one from the previous
Right.
painter, I noticed that the flame burns on Eloise's chest, like over her heart. And so I was like, oh, in a way, it's kind of like Marianne sets Eloise's heart on fire, which I think is like a nice metaphorical foreshadow of the film, of like what's to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of like visual symbolism, and a lot of that storytelling is done through that lens and through that motif. And
yeah,
there's a lot of, it's like I always have a little like inside joke with myself,
mm-hmm.
and Sonia's in on it too. Both Sonia and I once were making a movie together with this producer who's from Europe. And he always he was very artsy. He loved art.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great dude. We liked
Yeah.
him. And we would we'd just be out shooting like some random scene of just like two characters talking.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always be like, let's shoot some trees now. Let's shoot this pole, and and we're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, yes, very, very French. He'd always say, very French,
Yeah.
And I'd be like, Jesus Christ, come on, we're fucking behind schedule here. So anyways, there's a few shots in this movie where, it's just like, with the mirror and the pussy.
It's very
like,
French.
where I was just like, it's where I just always, whenever I see stuff like that, I go, very French.
Oh my God, I love that. That is hilarious. I mean, yeah, it is a French movie through and through. Like, another thing that makes me think of, rewatching this, I kind of was really trying to study like the visual style and the aesthetic this time around, now that I like have seen it so many times and know the story so well. And I'm curious what you think about this, but I was kind of feeling like it sort of has a modern feel to like French New Wave. Like, visually it reminded me a lot of like Jacques Demy films, like Umbrellas of Cherbourg, with his like color palette, the way they like blend or pop from the background. Like the characters' own like dresses will like match or pop from the background and stuff like that.
Right.
Or even like it deals a lot with memory, which is a huge French New Wave theme. And also like we get Marianne's voiceover recounting these memories. And then I think the biggest one for me would be like the blend of realism and surrealism that we find in a lot of like French New Wave films.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And even like just themes of like living as a woman in a time where it wasn't great. Like if you compare it to like Agnes Varda's films.
Yeah, totally.
The Sophia character, I think, is like a very interesting and fascinating character, and how the two main characters like relate to her. So
yes,
I mean, I think it's impossible to watch it and not feel like the filmmaker was, well, obviously she's French, so she had to have been influenced by, the greats of her country. I'm sure she was, but yeah, you could definitely feel it and see it.
Totally. Because like, yeah, exactly. Like to your point, most of this film is based in reality, and like specifically the harsh realities of being a woman at this time. I mean, we've got everything. We've got gender roles and expectations with like arranged marriages, abortions, sexuality, menstruation. Like this film really touches on all of it. I think there's a representation of women in this film that you also just don't get to see a lot of, especially in like period pieces specifically.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah, there you go. um, but then also the film has these beautiful, surreal, metaphorical moments referring to the myth or story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Sorry if I botched those names. They read that story, all three of them, Marianne, Eloise, and Sophie, the housemaid, together. And it's a metaphor of like Marianne and Eloise's own relationship. It's kind of meta, like life imitates art a little bit in there.
Totally.
Marianne is Orpheus, Eloise is Eurydice. And throughout the film, we see these really beautiful scenes of Marianne being kind of haunted by the image of Eloise in her wedding dress as she's like essentially taken from her and given unto another against her will,
Right.
much like the myth. And she'll like feel her presence behind her and turn to see this really ghost-like kind of, honestly, it's a really kind of creepy moment in the film. I was watching it with some friends and they were like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And then she'll like disappear into the darkness and you're like, whoa, this is very supernatural. But I think it's there to reflect the same story of like Eurydice disappearing into the underworld after Orpheus turns to look at her one last time. But yeah, there's so much about this movie that even just talking about it, I'm like getting the feels all over again. It's so beautiful. Especially that ending. I think it has one of the best endings I've ever seen.
Yeah, the ending is really powerful and strong. And then again, just going back to the performances again, where it's like those final scenes, it's like there's no dialogue really in those final heart-wrenching moments, and it's just calling back to the visuals and the looking and the staring and the music and all of that stuff. And it's just like that is filmmaking at its finest.
Agreed.
When you are able to evoke emotion without saying a goddamn word. That is impressive work.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you can even like, I think one thing that's so special about that end scene too, and yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned earlier, this episode is going to be full of spoilers. So if you haven't seen these films, just be warned. But I love in that end shot how it immediately, like when you're watching Eloise reacting to the song that Marianne actually introduced her to earlier in the film, you can literally, it made me think back to that moment when they're together in bed and she's like, I'm feeling something new now, regret. And Marianne says, do not regret, remember. And I feel like in that moment, you can really see her like just being catapulted back into that memory and like reliving all of those moments with Marianne. And it just breaks your heart every time, but you love every second of it, just watching her like, and you're sitting there for like the full length of the song and you're like, I don't ever want this to stop.
Yeah, you're just incredible. Like, she's in her feels and you're just right there with her.
Exactly. So good. But yeah, any final thoughts?
Criterion has an excellent Blu-ray.
Oh, awesome.
That I recommend checking out. And I haven't even checked them all out. I bought this Blu-ray when it came out because I was like, when Criterion released the Blu-ray, which was like, I don't know, 6 months after the movie was released, they were like, Criterion, you're worthy.
Yeah.
So I bought it. And like I do with a lot of the films that I buy, as we talked about on our queer horror movies, I had a la carte for years and didn't touch it.
Right. Oh my God. So funny.
So I busted open the Portrait of a Lady on Fire Blu-ray and watched it on Blu-ray, and it was gorgeous and beautiful and immaculate to look at. I haven't dove into the special features yet, but they have some very interesting and cool special features. So I'm excited to dive into those. Remember special features, folks? Well, you can still get them on the Criterion Blu-ray.
Y'all gotta watch this movie. It's amazing. And it's also as much as there's like so much heartbreak, it's also really funny. Like there's a lot of really funny moments in it that just keeps the momentum going. And these characters are just they feel so real. Like you feel like you're watching real people, which I really, really love about it as well.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire is streaming, it says, on Hulu.
Perfect.
With a subscription, which is always weird because like I have Hulu. I have all the Hulu because that's how I watch my live TV.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it says it's on Hulu, but then it's like not on Hulu. You have to have like the Stars package or the whatever.
It can be so confusing. I think this one is just on Hulu, regular Hulu.
Just straight up on Hulu.
If you have it, you can watch it.
Okay, well there you go. And if you don't have it, or if it's not on Hulu, I'm telling you, that Criterion Blu-ray.
Yeah, that'd be
looks
worth
good.
100%.
Yeah. Our second film in our queer love extravaganza is Moonlight, the 2016 film, written and directed by Barry Jenkins, based on the play by Terrell McCraney. And Moonlight follows Chiron. And this movie is told in 3 chapters. First chapter, we follow Chiron as a little boy. And he goes by the nickname of Little. Aptly named Little because, this kid is a runt. He is about as runt as you could be. The kid is small. He's shy. He's got a what do you say? A hard knock life. His mother is using drugs at home and at school, and out of the home he's getting bullied. He's extremely closed off and defensive and borderline mute. But he comes across this pseudo mayor of the hood, mayor of the streets, if you will. Juan, who's played by Mahershala Ali, which I believe he won an Academy Award for this performance.
That's right.
And Juan's a drug dealer, but Chiron is kind of, he's been taken under Juan's wing. Juan becomes a bit of a father figure to him, including helping with Chiron's curiosity about his own sexual orientation. There's this great scene where he's like asking Juan what a faggot is, because I'm sure he's been either called it or has heard it, and he's like questioning what is this word, and am I a faggot, and all this stuff. It's a heart-wrenching scene.
Yeah.
Then we flash forward. Chiron's a teenager, and he's still bullied. He's still closed off. His mother has fallen deeper into addiction, and Juan, unfortunately, has passed away. So one of his few childhood friends, Kevin, and Chiron, they have a sexual encounter together. Chiron's first sexual encounter. And unfortunately, peer pressure and toxic masculinity, they turn this budding romance into a tragedy. And then finally, we flash forward for a third time where Chiron is a grown adult man. And now he's working on the streets. He's become something that killed his father figure and has destroyed his mother. He is dealing. He's trapping. But when he gets a call from old Kevin, and his world turns upside down, as expertly displayed by one shot by Barry Jenkins. And Chiron comes to this new important crossroads in his life. And it is a real masterpiece, one of the best films, I think, of the last 25 years. And despite the Academy trying to, not so subtly take their moment away at the Academy Awards with some fucking bullshit shenanigans, which we're not even actually going to talk about because it takes away from how fucking beautiful and brilliant this film is.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Moonlight, what are your thoughts, Bella?
Oh, I'm so happy you picked this film. This is a film I would put right up next to Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Just another masterpiece. And not even just within like its genre of a romance or coming of age drama or even any like specific somatic element. I just think every single tiny facet that makes up this film is perfect. Like it is a perfect film in my opinion. And That being said, I think it's also easily like one of the greatest coming of age films I've ever seen.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I love this movie. I remember I watched this for the first time when it came out back in high school. And I'll never forget it because I messed up so bad. I watched it like on my like phone uh like before school randomly one day. And
Just as the film gods intended, you know.
yeah. And obviously like it did not hit the
Hold on,
same.
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Let's back up. You said you watched it on your phone before school?
Yeah. I had to like be up really early for dance rehearsals back in high school.
Okay.
And so I had like, yeah, I was up early and I wasn't on stage and I was like, fuck it. I'm gonna watch Moonlight because the Oscars are coming up and I wanna be on top of my shit. And I'm just so mad at myself to this day for having my first experience be on a tiny little phone. Because this movie deserves so much more. And so I'm happy to say that and the few other times I've watched this film, it's been on a much bigger screen.
An iPad.
Yeah, exactly. I started leveling up an iPad, a laptop. um, but yeah, God, I love this movie. There are so many things I'd love to talk about. I think the most notable thing for me is the color palette.
Yeah.
I love like colorization or just color palettes in film so much. It's one of my favorite aspects. I think it can honestly make me a little biased sometimes. Like if a film has beautiful colors, even if it's a shit film, like I'll automatically like it a little bit more. Um, but Moonlight is obviously in a league of its own. It's a fantastic film, and the colors just add so much to it. Um, and I love how the colors seem to have, on top of it just being visually stunning, the colors kind of have meaning. Like they're in a relationship
Hmm.
with the screenplay and the characters and the context of the film. Notably, the color blue is referenced a
Mm.
lot in this film. You can
Yeah.
spot it in like almost every single frame. And it's also written like in directly into the screenplay. You know, we have that integral scene with Juan and Little in the first act down by the beach.
I was a wild little shorty, man. Just like you. Running around with no shoes on, the moon was out. This one time, I run by this old lady. I was running, hollering, cutting a fool, boy. This old lady, she stopped me. She said, running around, catching up all that light. In moonlight, black boys look blue. You blue. That's why I gonna call you. Blue.
Say your name, Blue.
Nah. At some point, you gotta decide for yourself who you gonna be. Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
So throughout the film, this proves to be like a massively significant moment in Chiron's life. You know, he's struggling with his sexuality and his identity. Uh, and then like multiple times by multiple people, he's asked, "Who are you? Like, who is you?" And he doesn't ever really seem to know how to answer the question because
Right.
he's like
Right.
either doesn't really know or just simply hasn't allowed himself to accept it and know it and explore it. And so he's trying on all these like different hats and identities. Like when we meet him as Black in the third act, it kind of, to me, it seems like he's trying to become Juan a little bit. Like he
Yeah.
dresses
Totally.
like him, he acts like him. And because of like his childhood trauma in act two, or chapter two, like we see that he has this need to put on this like hard facade.
Yeah.
But at his core, he knows what Kevin meant to him. He knows Kevin is a massive part of his identity. And I think that's why he chooses to go by Black as an adult, like the nickname that Kevin gave to him in high school. Like it's the one thing that rings true to him, as it's like a nickname given to him by the one person outside of like Juan and Teresa, his kind of surrogate parents, if you will. who like really saw him and accepted him and even loved him for just who he is. But anyways, after that rant, coming back to Blue, I just think it like adds another level of emotion and beauty. In other words, it just really adds to the emotional depth and like mood and tone of the film in a way that ties it all together.
Yeah, it does. And going back to that third act, there's like rewatching it this time, there's like this detail that I loved. You're totally right. Well, it's also like, you know, sometimes when you grow up in the hood, you have to, this is what I love about this film. It's like that hood masculinity that you have to like show. You have to like, even if you're not hard, you have to appear hard. Something I had to like learn growing up. You know, it's like, I was not a strong young man, but I had to like take some licks and give some licks just to like survive. And that's what Chiron's doing here in this third act. And it's just like one scene that's just like, we come in and Chiron, he's an adult, he's done his time, you know, he's kind of like followed the footsteps of Juan, as you said. He's trapping. Yeah. For all the gringos out there, trapping means like he's dealing. He's got his fronts. He's jacked. He's fucking ripped.
Yeah, I was like, who the hell is that?
Like, this motherfucker looks like a man. He is a man. He is a runt no more.
Yes.
But when he goes to visit Kevin, you know, at his restaurant, he gets out of the car and the camera just follows him as he walks from his car to the front door of the restaurant. And we see that he's the same. We see this like shy, just from behind. We don't even see his face. We see the way he walks. Yeah. Shy, introverted, uncomfortable. We see like his hands are in his pocket. He's closed himself off. His arms are all tight to his body. His shoulders are crunched up to his ears. And he's got his head down to the ground. And despite being this hard dude from the streets, he's still little. You know, he's still that little boy, just like looking for that one friend that he had, that one like little love connection that he had as a growing up, this one person who like gave him the time of day.
Totally. And I love how like Kevin even sees that. Like when he first sees him, he's like, whoa, like, who are you? Again, he's like, who are you? And then like a second after, he's like, oh shit, you're still the same shy little kid who can only say 3 words at a time. Right. And it's just like a really beautiful moment between them of like coming full circle a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Little bit of history for this one is so Barry Jenkins and the playwright Terrell McCraney, they essentially grew up in the same neighborhood. Oh, wow. Although they didn't even know each other growing up. But they grew up very close to each other, and they had a lot of like similar experiences. According to Jenkins, like both their mothers, you know, dealt with drug addiction and stuff. But somebody gave Jenkins the play, McCraney's play, and Jenkins fell in love with it. And he was like, man, just let me take a crack at this. Let me try adapting it. And if you're not into it, we can, you know, go our separate ways. And Jenkins said it just flew out of him. You know, he wrote it like, and it's just like one of those things. Well, for all the writers out there, you know, when it's just like when you get that story and it's like from the heart and it just, you relate to it so much and it just flows out of you. Yeah. That's what happened to Barry with this script. And he gave it to McCraney, and Terrell's thoughts when he first read it were he told Barry Jenkins, he said, I will never forgive you for making this so beautiful. And so the rest is history.
Oh my God, I love that.
But I mean, how crazy is it that they grew up like,
that's,
you know,
insane
in the same neighborhood and ended up collaborating, you know, on this beautiful work of art.
I mean, it makes so much sense in that like this movie really, I know I said this about the last one, but this one I really truly feel I'm like, these are real people. Like there's no separation of like, this is a movie besides like stylistically for me, where I'm just like, I truly believe these characters are experiencing this and have these identities and are going through that. Like, it's so authentic and just so from the heart.
The one thing I want to mention before we move on is the casting of the 3 versions of Chiron are outstanding.
Yes.
I mean,
I'm so glad you brought it up.
I think even the filmmakers knew how like great / lucky, I don't know, like it's because they put it on the poster.
Yeah, I mean, it's like shocking.
Maybe they did maybe some Photoshop to alter eye placement or whatever. I don't know if they did or not, but like I wouldn't be surprised. But like they use all 3 faces to make up one face in the film poster, and you're just like, whoa! You look at it as like from a distance, and it just looks like one person.
Yeah.
But then you move in closer, and it's like the 3 versions of him.
It's amazing.
But poster aside, in the film itself, when we jump in time, and it's always just like comes in on like some shot of Chiron doing his thing, either at class or just driving around immediately from like, you're just like, oh, there he is. Like it's incredible what they did with this casting. Like he looks, and it's also the performances, because he feels like such a consistent character despite him being played by 3 different people. Like it always feels like Chiron. Like I was talking about, just that walk from the car to the restaurant. It's like, there's that little boy. Like, I don't know what order they shot this in, but fucking hell, man, they did it. They nailed it.
I know. I'm so curious about the order of that. Yeah, especially I think like from little to Chiron in terms of like chapters. Like I was like, that's the same kid, just grown up. Like they did such an incredible job. And I'm glad you mentioned it too, because I was on Letterboxd and I was seeing so much like flack talking about how Chiron is like a blank slate with no personality, which made it easy for like these 3 actors to play him, which I completely disagree with, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think even though Chiron is like quiet and shy, even behind like his hard facade in the 3rd act, I think there's still so much personality there. And I think,
there's so much going on. Even like in the 1st act. I mean, that kid, that kid is a great actor. I mean, that scene in the beginning where he's like, hiding from the bullies or the thing. It's like, oh God, it just rips your heart out.
Yes, totally. And so I think so much of that comes from the actors, and I'm just so impressed with how much they were able to match the character and just like each other's performances in a way that's like incredibly convincing, of being like one person in 3 stages of life.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. And even Kevin, like the 3 Kevins, all I thought were great casting as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I thought they like looked similar and had the same like energy, just very charming energy. Yeah, exactly. Right. Charming and calming energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this film is amazing. I also want to shout out Naomi Harris as Chiron's mom. Like that was just a powerhouse performance. I mean, unreal. She's great. It's just like that. I'm so glad that we get to see Chiron and his mom kind of reconcile with each other in that final act, like after all the shit that they've been through. That scene is so real. Like I swear, it's like her performance is so amazing. I can literally feel like her heart cracking and just like how desperately she wants to mend their relationship. It's amazing. And the last thing I have to shout out is Nicholas Britell's score. I love him so much. He's one of my favorite composers, and I think his score is everything in this film. Like, I think it's a very, very big aspect of like what makes this film. And it also has like amazing needle drops in this movie as well.
Hello Stranger by Barbara Lewis. Not gonna lie, like I'm not a kind of guy, as you know, you've been to the movies with me, Bella.
Yeah.
When people talk or sing or even chew their popcorn too loudly in a movie theater, I have no problem turning to them and saying, "Excuse me, could you please shut the fuck up?"
Yeah.
But when that needle drop hit, I
Oh.
sang along with that fucker when I was in the movie theater.
You can't
When that
not.
chick,
You
yeah.
can't not.
Yeah, when
Even like cell therapy, like that scene is so good. And yeah, that ends with "Hello, Stranger." I mean,
Yeah,
it's the perfect summation of their relationship. And like,
totally.
I remember just being so curious what the song was when he calls him up and he's like, "Yeah, the song came on, reminding me of you." It's like, oh man, what's it gonna be? And I absolutely love that moment because I love how literal it is, like in the lyrics,
Yeah.
because
Right.
it's like when they're looking at each other in that moment, it's like there's no world in which they could misunderstand each other, and like so much is being said without being said, and I just love it so much. It's so good.
Moonlight, if you guys haven't seen it, check it out. It is a real treasure, a real American treasure, and it is streaming right now on HBO Max or Max, however you want to say it. It's probably going to change names again in 4 months because David Zaslav is a fucking jerk off. Well, before I get too crazy on David Zaslav, we're going to take a break. During that break, you're going to hear from PGA producer, Gimme 3 producer, and my wife, Sonia Maru, in a segment that we call Sonia's Movie Minute. Stick around for all that and more here on the Gimme 3 podcast.
Hello, I'm Sonia, and this is my Movie Minute. There are so many great queer love stories with happy endings. Love, Simon, But I'm a Cheerleader, Bros, even Bound, and so many more. But I guess a tragic love story makes powerful cinema, because when Nick told me the topic of this week's Give Me 3, the first movie that came to my mind was Kimberly Pierce's Boys Don't Cry. Boys Don't Cry is based on the true story of a young transgender man named Brandon Tina and his brief relationship with Lana Tisdale and several other people from Falls City, Nebraska. A sense of danger and dread threads through the whole film because Brandon is passing in a man that's hostile or even lethal for queer people. But you also feel his elation at being briefly invited into this group. Of course, you can't talk about Boys Don't Cry without talking about how mind-blowingly incredible Hilary Swank is as Brandon. Her performance is nuanced, beautiful, tragic, and even pretty funny at times. When I saw this when I was 17, I was especially affected by the relationship between Brandon and Lana. They know there's danger and dishonesty in their connection, but at the same time, they both feel seen and protected in a way that had previously felt impossible and is completely irresistible. Plus, as I've mentioned before, Chloe Sevigny is one of my absolute favorites, and as always, she's wonderful as Lana. It is worth noting that aspects of their relationship are embellished for the sake of the film, so I'm not necessarily talking about the real relationship between Brandon and Lana, just the depiction of it in the movie. If you haven't seen Boys Don't Cry, or if you haven't seen it recently, it remains tragically urgent, but it also shows a love that's hopeful and inspiring.
All right, welcome back to the Gimme 3 podcast, everybody. This is a series for cinephiles, and we are talking queer love stories today and all week. Queer love stories, and thus far we have discussed Portrait of a Lady on Fire and the 2016 Academy Award winner Moonlight. And now we are going to discuss another movie that was fucking snubbed at the Academy Awards. I'm not this is the fuck the Academy Awards episode for old Black Ice here.
Honestly,
fuck.
So true. Yeah, we could not do this theme without including this final and third film. It is a staple of queer cinema and cinematic history. An incredibly powerful, timeless, and iconic film, Ang Lee's 2005 Western romance, Brokeback Mountain. So the film stars Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal alongside Michelle Williams and Anne Hathaway, just to name a few in what is an extremely stacked cast. Based on Annie Proulx's short story, the film follows Ennis Del Mar, played by Heath Ledger, and Jack Twist, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, two cowboys working on a ranch together for the summer on Brokeback Mountain in Wyoming. That first summer, in their own private oasis in the mountains, Jack and Ennis fall into a romantic relationship. But when their summer comes to an end, Jack and Ennis, haunted by an unaccepting society and their own internal biases, feel they must go their separate ways. But unable to forget each other, we get to see their complex love story evolve over the next 20 years. Brokeback Mountain is a very culturally relevant film in queer cinematic history, as it's regarded as one of the major films that really brought queer stories and queer representation into mainstream cinema. There was a lot of homophobic rhetoric around the making of the film and around the film's release as well. The screenplay, written by Diana Osana and Larry McMurtry, was passed around in Hollywood for a very long time. Gus Van Sant was asked to direct first. Pedro Almodovar was asked to direct, and finally it landed in Ang Lee's hands. He was actually just about to retire, but he read the script and was so moved by it that it pulled him right out of retirement back into the director's chair. So the film, like Nick pointed out, was nominated and snubbed for Best Picture at the 78th Academy Awards. But it did go on to win Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score, as it should. Yeah, I love this movie so much. The cast is incredible. It has 4 of my favorite actors ever. Seriously, like I almost felt like this movie was made for me because I'm like obsessed with Heath and Jake, and then also Michelle Williams and Anne is my idol. And there's also like a crazy amount of cameo appearances from some more of my favorites, like Linda Cardellini, Anna Faris, and even like David Harbour, which was so random but so good. But anyways, what were your thoughts on this film, Nick?
So when this movie came out, I was in high school, and this was a very important film for me. I really remember watching. I think I saw this movie multiple times in the theater, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because what year did this movie come out? 2004?
2000. Yeah, I think it was 2005, but it may have been 2000.
2005. Something like that. This was around the time in high school where I started to really see movies and understand them. Obviously, I'd been watching movies all my life.
Right.
I always like had this connection to cinema, and I always like wanted to work in film in some form or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
But it was around this time as a teenager that I began to understand why a director puts a camera where they put a camera. I was taking actually my first film class when this movie came out in high school. And so I was just excited to see a new Ang Lee movie. But I also remember like when this movie came out, there was like a lot of homophobic shit going on about it. So anyways, I remember going to see this movie in the theaters with my best friend, my male best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Corey Teeter, who's not listening to this because he has kids. But anyways, he was in the film class with me, and I remember, taking him to the theaters. I was like, oh man, here we go. 2 straight dudes going to see these cowboys bone each other. But anyways, it was, I remember just being blown away by the use of lines and like the frame composition and where Lee was putting the camera and what he was doing with the colors. And it was a seminal movie for me watching growing up, because it was one of the first instances where I was like, whoa, I understand it all. I understand why this work of art is working on a level beyond just what's presented to me. So for that, this movie has always been kind of like a key piece in my like film making and my cinephilic journey.
Yes.
Is that even a word? Cinephilic?
I think it is now.
It sounds gay, so we're going to stick with it.
I like it. It works for me.
Cool.
I love that. I I'm so sad to hear that or just to think about not having seen any of these movies that I love in theaters yet. I'm hoping some showings pop up in LA in the next year or so because I got to see these movies on the big screen. They're absolutely I feel like we picked three just visually stunning films, and Brokeback Mountain, certainly, like you said, the colors in this film are just amazing. And then of course the setting, like this would honestly, I would pick this for like a Earth Day film. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful the way it captures just the expansive mountain range of like Wyoming and everything, and just building their own private oasis together. Like I think this movie has a lot of similarities with Moonlight in that way, where it's like it made me think of how Kevin and Chiron have like the beach as kind of like their own private place for each other, and then Brokeback Mountain is Ennis and Jack's private place together where they can like really just be themselves. And
Not only that connection, Bella, which I totally agree with,
yeah,
but also both characters, Chiron and Kevin, and then Ennis and Jack,
yeah,
are dealing with this world that is hyper masculine, where you have to be kind of like hyper masculine to survive. In a sense, they're supposed to, in this film especially, you know, like manliness and like what it means to be a man in conservative middle America, and they're supposed to like support the family and bring home the bacon. And well, both of these dudes kind of have trouble in that department. Ennis is always like looking for work, and Jack is like forced to take work with his father-in-law. And both men are kind of like feel emasculated at home by their like lack of being able to support, but more really like on the when you dive into it, it's just like their inability to connect with this world that doesn't really make sense to them. And the only time they actually feel like men is when they're fucking each other in the mountains.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's so beautiful. Like, and it's so devastating. I was like, I know this movie is devastating. I know it's going to break me all over again, but I had forgotten just how many moments of devastation there is. Like, it's not even just like the fact that the ending is so tragic. It's like everything building up to it. Just, it hurts your heart a little bit, a lot of it, honestly. Like, and you know, so much of that is like, I was reading about Annie Poo's short story and the film that the film is based on. And she talked about how at its core, this is a story about homophobia. And I think, or at least like in her short story, I don't know how much it strays on screen, and I think the film does a really excellent job of like depicting this through the characters and their experiences, like you were saying. And to add to that, like out of the two of them, I would say Heath Ledger's character Ennis seems to have the biggest struggle with his sexuality because of his own like homophobic biases and fears as well. Like, whereas over time we see Gyllenhaal's character Jack Twist becomes much more open-minded, and he kind of really fully accepts himself and loves himself and as a queer man. Like, he becomes much more unafraid and proud of who he is. He's like, I'm not going to just do this in the mountains anymore. I'm going to live my life in truth, basically, true to who I am.
Yeah, we'll try this one. And I'll say it just once. Go ahead. Tell you what, we could have had a good life together. Fucking real good life. Had us a place of our own. But you didn't want it, Ennis. So what we got now is Brokeback Mountain. Everything's built on that. That's all we got, boy. Fucking all. So I hope you know that if you don't ever know the rest. You count the damn few times that we have been together in nearly 20 years, and you measure the short fucking leash you keep me on, and then you ask me about Mexico, and you tell me you kill me for needing something I don't hardly never get. You have no idea how bad it gets.
And that just adds such another level of heartbreak to me in this film, where to see Ennis and his own trauma, like as a kid, stopping him from being who he is and being with the person that he loves most. We learned that not at 9 years old, his father showed him like a horrific murder scene of a gay man who was targeted and killed in their rural community. So he has that like horrifying memory in the back of his mind always, because he's traumatized from it, and he just can't let himself accept that there may be a queerness to his character or to his identity because of that fear. And so then on top of that, we see him walking around in like the worst state of paranoia, feeling like everyone knows or suspects. And
Right.
I just think that is such a painfully like authentic portrayal of sexual repression, and like the honestly very, very valid fear of the danger that homophobic and patriarchal societies can instill in queer people, especially in this like you were talking about, this like setting of like rural Wyoming from 1960 to 1980. Like it was definitely not an accepting space for queer people.
Right.
But that all that being said, what I love about this film is like, although it tackles these really intense issues of like homophobia and sexual repression and identity head first, I think it also has a really brilliant balance of like these really intense themes and beauty. Like there are so many gorgeous elements in this film, from like the visual beauty we talked about with like the natural landscapes, but also just a depiction of like one of the most beautiful love stories ever told. Like Heath and Jake have an undeniable electrifying chemistry as Ennis and Jack. I think these are two of their most powerful and impressive performances. Like they really poured their mind, body, and soul into these characters, as well as their love and respect for the characters and the story itself. And I think having this balance is a huge aspect of like what made this film so impactful to so many audiences all over the world.
And Bella, if we're going to talk about beauty and the beauty of this film, we cannot go Anne Hathaway's, what I call the trio of pears. That pair of eyebrows. Mwah.
Oh, I'm in love with her.
That pair, them pairs of teeth. Wowza. And finally, her boobies. We get to see Anne Hathaway boobies.
I forgot about that. Oh my god, I
so
love.
If we're
her
talking
so
about beauty,
much.
we gotta talk about the holy trinity of Anne Hathaway beauty.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, she is absolutely stunning. What a catch for Jake Gyllenhaal's character. God, and I love the scenes with their family in this film. Like that scene,
the Thanksgiving football.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Her
So
face,
good.
the way she's like, yes, please. But then she's also like trying to keep it together. Right. I love that scene. It's amazing. And I think it also just it's a scene that says so much about Jack's character and like character development as well. Like as he becomes more self-accepting, he actually lives a better life because he's not struggling so much internally, that he can like be even better in all different aspects of his life as well. Like
he can stand up for himself.
Yeah, he can stand up for himself and his family, to like her dad, who's like a total piece of shit.
Yeah.
Daddy? Daddy?
Hell, we don't eat with our eyes. I want your boy to grow up to be a man, don't you, daughter? Boy, should watch football.
Not until he finishes eating the meal that his mama took 3 hours fixing. You sit down, you old son of a bitch! This is my house, this is my child, and you are my guest. You sit down before I knock your ignorant ass into next week.
Boys watch football.
Right.
It's like, okay.
Boys do be watching football, though, Bella. Boys do be watching football. I will say that.
Yeah. Oh, it's so lame. No, I can't.
Go Pack, go. Go Pack, go. Well, Brokeback Mountain, an absolute treasure. I can't believe this movie is 20 years or gonna be 20 years old.
Oh my God, yeah, that's crazy.
Because that makes me feel really old. Because I was just talking about seeing that movie in high school. It's streaming on It's streaming on Peacock. So check that out if you haven't seen it. I did see it. You were lamenting that you haven't gotten to see it on the big screen,
Yeah.
Bella. And it's getting to that age where it's starting to pop up in repertory screenings. I think I saw it actually but like 2 or 3 years ago on at the Beverly. Maybe it was even last year they did a screening of it. So and especially it looks like it did come out 2005. So I would not be surprised if we see some 20th anniversary screenings.
Speak it into existence.
Let's speak it into existence. My friends at New Beverly Vidiots American Cinematheque, if you're listening to this next year, great opportunity to screen Brokeback Mountain in 35 millimeter, please.
Oh, yes, please.
Well, folks, that is a wrap for today's episode. However, if you feel like you haven't gotten enough romance in your life, if you feel like you need some more queer love stories in your life, well, stick around because we have got part 2 of this theme coming your way this Thursday. Give me 3 more queer love stories. And we have got some great films to discuss on that episode that you're not going to want to miss. But until then, we want to hear from you, your questions, your suggestions, your thoughts, your desires. You can let us know what you think of these films. If you have other queer love stories that you want to suggest or just want to talk about, tell us what your favorite queer love stories are, your favorite queer films for Pride Month. Let us know. You can message us on Instagram at the Gimme 3 Podcast. That's GIMME, spell out 3 podcast. Go to Instagram, Gimme 3 Podcast. You type it into the old search dealie. Or you can send us a text message. And you can do that by scrolling down to our episode description. And at the top of that episode description, you're going to see a link that says, send us a text message. And then you click on that and you send us a text message and let us know whatever your heart desires. Bella, tell the fine folk here that listen to our show where they can find you on the socials. If they want to argue with you about a portrait of a lady.
Yeah, come at me. Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile, or on Letterboxd. You guys can follow me at BF Stratus. Just B and then my last name, F Stratus.
You can follow me on Letterboxd at Nicholas Ibarra, on Instagram at Nicholas Ibarra, and on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ibarra. And the P stands for Portrait of a Man on Fire.
Wow.
Could you imagine what a great mashup film that would be? Can you imagine that? Portrait of a Lady on Fire mashed up with Man on Fire?
Wow. Never would have thought of that.
Nobody has. Nobody has. Thanks for listening to the Gimme 3 Podcast, everybody. We will see you at the movies.